Father Kyle Etzel is associate pastor at St. Joe's Parish in West St. Paul, my home parish. He grew up in Chanhassen at St. Hubert's, among other places. He went to school initially at Iowa State and then transferred to St. Paul Seminary, did pre-theology, and had many other steps along the way. So, and he'll tell us about that. So,
thanks, Mary.
All right, let's welcome
We're good, okay. I'm going to use my big boy voice. I hope I'm loud enough. I'll trust you to tell me if you have trouble hearing me. So, as Mary said, I'm Father Kyle Etzel. I'm the parochial vicar, the associate pastor at St. Joe's up the hill. I know I'm new to the St. Paul side, so I always say I'm up the hill. But I know there's another hill over there somewhere with a cathedral on it. And yeah, I'm up the hill behind us. Yeah, on the west, in West St. Paul, which is on the west side, but it's actually south. Anyway, so as Mary said, I grew up in the West Metro. We moved to Carver. We lived in Carver, but while we were building our house, we rented an apartment in Chaska, right on the border of Chaska and Chanhassen near Hazeltine Golf Course, and so we were in St. Hubert territory, and so that's where we went, and then we stayed there, and so I was 9 when we moved to St. Hubert. I grew up my early years in Iowa. I was born in Rochester, so I'm not an Iowan, but not that there's anything wrong with being an Iowan. But my dad was a sales rep and agronomist for Pioneer Seed Corn. And so he covered southeast Minnesota when I was born, and then northeast Iowa when I was little. And so we lived in Mason City, and then a couple years in Urbandale, which is a suburb of Des Moines. And so when I was 9, we moved back to the Twin Cities, where all my extended family still are. My dad's one of 7, and so most of our weekends when we were in Iowa, with him being out most of the week and my mom taking care of us, we didn't have a whole lot of things that we needed to do in Iowa on the weekend, and so most weekends we were up here in the Twin Cities visiting my grandparents and my aunts and uncles and all my cousins in the West Metro. So the Lake Minnetonka general region is really where I grew up. We lived south of the lake, but my cousins and all my aunts and uncles and grandparents were in Hamel and Medina, Loretto, Wayzata. So that's really where I call home now. My parents live in Loretto, and they go to Holy Name of Jesus, so that's one of the possible home parishes other than St. Hubert. Also spent, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. So graduated from Chaska High School, and I went to Iowa State, as Mary said. We grew up, we're a Catholic family, but kind of grew up in we went to Mass most Sundays. I'll just leave it at that. And so I really didn't have that encounter or make the personal choice of really living my Catholic faith until I was in college. I'd always maintained, even when I was on my own down there in Iowa, going to Sunday Mass mostly, but it was after a period where I followed all the cute girls over to the big evangelical megachurch that I realized, no, I really do love Catholicism. I don't know what I love about it, but I do. And I had an experience of just really kind of realizing that the life I was living wasn't as fulfilling as it seemed like it should be. And so that was a Saturday night. I had this great sort of it wasn't great because it was pretty sad, but it was a Saturday night. So Sunday morning I went to Mass at the Newman Center at Iowa State at St. Thomas Aquinas Parish. And it was the weekend that they were promoting their new small groups. So I know we're big on that these days here in the Archdiocese. So I decided, well, what the heck, I'll try it out, and I joined a small group that was meeting near the dorm that I lived in. They kind of had it organized for on campus, so you'd always have one near your dormitory, and it was the first time that I really encountered friendship in Christ, and in that way where somebody wants to know you and love you as a friend just because you are, right? Just because you're worth it. And so that was profound for me, and it very quickly drew me into the life of the parish. By the end of the semester, I was on the parish life committee, and they asked me at the end of that school year to lead campus ministry in the coming year. It would have been my senior year at Iowa State. So I got into it quick. In the midst of that, when I was home, I would frequently meet with my pastor at the time, Father Rolf Tollefson, who's the new pastor at Nativity. I'm very glad to have him nearby. He's still my spiritual director. So I'd meet with him on occasion, and the thing that really started that was, I think it was Easter of my junior year, so not long after I came back into that small group and really practicing the faith, I went to my second confession ever in my life. I was 21, and so the importance of encouraging that sacrament is big for me. But I went to confession. It was Easter week. It was, I think, a Holy Thursday, and Father Tollefson was always very good about hearing as many confessions as showed up on Holy Thursday, sometimes many hours in the confessional at St. Hubert. And I was so nervous, I put myself at the end of the line. Anybody who showed up, I did one of these. Well, my dad had come with me, and he was one of the first in the line, so he waited for about 2 hours for me to gather up the gumption. And I finally went in. I was the last one. I was so nervous. I put on my best suit. I had a tie on, and Father Tollefson heard my confession, and he was very gentle and warm in his reception of me, and it was a great healing moment for me. But he said, well, when I'm done with confessions, if you can stick around, I'd like you to introduce yourself to me. And I said, well, Father, I'm the last one in line, so I'll meet you outside. So I waited for him in the narthex and introduced myself, and he sort of, from that moment, took me under his wing. He kind of snuck it in. He was like, oh, well, I'd really like to do some young adult stuff, so maybe we could meet to talk about that. And so I thought I was just like the cool young Catholic who he wanted to help out, to have help out at the parish. But I think he had other things in mind. And so over the course of that spring and summer, we met when I was home, had coffee or lunch or whatever, and he'd kind of do some formation for me, just kind of backfilling some of those things that I didn't learn in catechesis growing up, and a little bit of spiritual direction. And then I was home in November of 2013 for Thanksgiving. So we're coming up, it'll be a week from today. We were out for coffee 10 years ago, and we were getting into the car to go back to the parish. So it was November 27th, 2013. And he said, Kyle, have you ever thought about being a priest? And I had a girlfriend who I wanted to ask to marry me relatively soon, and I said, oh, well, that's really nice of you to think that I'd be a good priest, Father, but I'm not. It was kind of a lame answer. And so we were at a coffee shop that was like basically across the parking lot from St. Hubert's. So like 30-second drive, I dropped him off. I said, yeah, no, don't worry about it. I just thought I'd ask. Well, I dropped him off, and I turned I had a little truck at the time. I turned it around, and I was getting ready to drive back to Carver, and I was passing the part of the church at St. Hubert where the tabernacle is, which I didn't put that together until later, but this was the moment I had just a big Holy Spirit moment. It was, now I know, one of the first times I've experienced, not many times, but one of the first times I experienced like a physical manifestation of the Holy Spirit, a very peaceful, just overwhelming but peaceful moment I pulled into a parking spot because I really couldn't focus on driving. I still know where the parking spot is at St. Hubert's. And I was gripping the steering wheel really hard, and I was very much at peace. I felt that the Lord was calling me to be his priest, at least to discern it in a serious way, an active way, but I wasn't necessarily happy with the Lord in those moments. So the exact dialogue we'll just leave to the Lord's memory. So that was November of 2013, and from that moment, and it's really been a source of grace for me in sustaining me in my discernment and seminary, and then now in my vocation of going back to that memory and that moment in my life where I felt the Lord was calling me in a serious way to be his priest. And so that's the first thing, is never underestimate the power of asking that question, of asking a young man who seems to be in love with the church and life with the Lord, of asking him whether or not he's thought about being a priest. So that was November of 2013. I had another year and a half at least, I thought, on my schedule at Iowa State, but we really were kind of in the mode of trying to strike while the iron was hot. And so I finally broke up with my girlfriend in a definitive way. I think it was early February, so it took me a couple months. I was dragging my feet a bit. Father Tolfson was actually the first one I called when I broke up with my girlfriend. It was like 9 o'clock at night. My mom doesn't like that story so much because she was, why did you call Father first? Why not me? But anyway, it ended up being September of 2014, right before I would have started my second senior year at Iowa State, that I moved back and I transferred to St. Thomas. And the thought was that I would go straight into SJV and finish my undergrad with a philosophy on top of it and maybe kind of try to accelerate some stuff. Well, the shortest version of that is St. Thomas didn't make it easy and it didn't work out. So after that spring semester of 2015, I moved into the rectory at St. Charles Borromeo. Father Prisbilla had been working with me because he was a vocations director at the time, and he was going through that transition of going back into parish work, and Father Bloom, who was coming into the vocations office, was going to live with them at St. Charles. And so they thought, well, this Kyle, he's already filled out an application and we're basically ready to send him, but we got to get this undergrad stuff done, so why don't we have him come and live with us? It's a shorter commute and we can do some formation and felt discernment and community life together. At the time also, Father Mark Dosh of Happy Memory was living there as well in his retirement, and so 3 priests and myself, and also Father Bill Duffer, who was at Nativity as well, where we were all 5 living there together, and that was for 2 years while I finished a Catholic Studies degree at St. Thomas. Very blessed in that, to have that witness. I say often that Father Dosh saved my vocation on many occasions. It was a rough transition for me because I'd been expecting to start seminary, and then everything kind of got destabilized a little bit. But the Lord's plans are better than ours, and so I got to live with Father Dosh, Father Bloom, and Father Prisbilla, all fantastic priests, holy men, and good fathers. And they really started in me a love for community life and the priesthood. And I didn't realize it at the time, but how important that would be for me. But I give them credit for that. And so I finished my undergrad in Catholic Studies after winding through engineering and military science and logistics, supply chain management, and then Catholic Studies. So that was the 7-year undergrad, and then pre-theology, as Mary mentioned, through the St. Paul Seminary, and so that's like the 2 years of philosophy, right? And very grateful for a lot of good professors, and the seminary, our fantastic major seminary. Those 2 years were big for me too, because I was really kind of the start, and it was a bit rocky. I'm a pretty normal guy, but I was also 7 years in undergrad, so 2 years of more undergrad type philosophy was tough for me to stay in the swing of that kind of schoolwork. But then when theology started, my formator, Father John Gallus, who was also a former associate of St. Joe's, very holy priest, really took me under his wing and took over that role from Father Tollefson, of keeping me on the level-headed and on the straight and narrow. And also my spiritual director for all my 6 years at the seminary was Father Jeff Heward, who passed away. Yeah. Sorry. It's been a long weekend. Just very grateful for those 4 years. Our seminary is fantastic, and the new leadership that have come in after and built on the great foundation that Monsignor Callahan left. I've just been very blessed by their formation, and now, so I was ordained in May on Memorial Day weekend with 3 of my brothers, Father John Rumsa, Father Ryan Glazer, and my very good friend, Father Will Kratt. So Ryan was in Rome, and Father John had taken some time off, and so we were never in class together. We were ordained together, but Father Will and I were Tweedledum and Tweedledee for all of our years at the seminary together, and now he's at St. Hubert. So my classmate went to keep an eye on the home parish, and so just grateful, especially in these first 6 months of ministry for my parish. Having a parish makes it makes all the hypothetical work that you do in seminary, all the practice, pretend stuff, it makes all of that worth it when you've got a real spiritual family to help lead. And so very blessed also in my pastor. Father Luke and I are very similar people, and so that was just a grace from the Lord to have a pastor like-minded and good complementary temperaments to work together, and such a generous parish to help support us, especially in a time of transition together. So that's the broad. Now the other thing that came in, and I kind of referenced it over the course of my discernment in relation to community life, is the Oratory of St. Philip Neri. So in pre-theology, I spent a summer at Holy Cross, shortly, less than a year after Father Byron Haken and Father Spencer Howe had moved there. Now I had known Father Spencer through his work at Holy Name of Jesus, where my parents go to church, and then following him, Father Bryce Evans, who took over for him as parochial vicar at Holy Name. So I had these connections, and I didn't know it, but Father Howe and Father Evans and Father Hagen, who I was working for that summer, were part of this thing. They were trying to start this thing called the Oratory of St. Philip Neri, and I'd never heard of St. Philip, and I had never heard of the Oratory until that summer of 2018. And I didn't go there to discern the Oratory, and I didn't actually do anything that summer with the Oratory, except for working with those 2 guys. But they sort of, by way of example and just answering my questions, set a really good, at least a hope for what community life in the priesthood could look like by the example and in the way of life of St. Philip. Obviously, we also build upon and receive a lot of support in our formation of the Oratory from the Companions of Christ, who are already here and in the Archdiocese as a fraternal community of priests, and indeed they took a lot of their identity from St. Philip's example as well. So we're sort of kindred spirits, the companions in the Oratory. The oratory started by St. Philip in the 16th century in Rome to re-evangelize Rome following the Reformation and sort of a decline in the spiritual life in Rome. Began with prayer. And so the oratory is called an oratory because they started in conversation with each other and in conversation with God. Oratory, right? So it began with St. Philip and his friends, and then they attracted more people, so they moved it over to the church next door to where St. Philip was living. And that eventually grew into something more formal, which had this community of priests that were already living together, and a group of lay people around them that they were ministering to, and then also together as a whole being this evangelizing apostolic entity in the local church. And so that's the short version of what the oratory always sets out to do and what the oratory's always done for nearly 450 years. We're coming up, I think in 2 years, it'll be 450 years since the founding of the oratory. So anyway, that's a whole lot of tangents just to say, I started as friends with Father Bryce and Father Byron and the priests who have since discerned out of the oratory, but who are still great friends, Father Howe and Father Haverstock and Father Jaspers. And that's how the oratory always starts. It's a group of friends, a group of priests who choose each other. We choose each other every day. There's no rule that binds us. St. John Henry Newman, who is also an oratorian, he said the rule of the oratory is fraternal love. And so we don't take any vows. There's no public promise for eternity to each other. We get up every morning and we choose each other, and that's the example that hopefully is encouraging to the lay faithful who also are part of the lay oratory, and hopefully an example that can be a leaven in the local church. And so the Archbishop has moved us as of 2021 to St. Mary's in Lowertown, and so that's where we've been working to establish the oratory. And this past week we actually launched in a kind of a soft way the lay oratory. So we've got a couple dozen families and couples and single people who are a part of that, and we have holy hour and prayer time together and do work in the parish and in the Lowertown neighborhood to be that leaven that the Lord wants us to be. And so always in work with the Archdiocese and with the Archbishop, who please God someday soon will found the oratory. It's actually the local bishop who founds the oratory. So that's how the maintenance of the relationship is kept. So even though we'll be kind of in a special zone in terms of how we work with the Archdiocese, it's always in friendship with the local bishop. So, and Archbishop Hebda's favorite saint is St. Philip, and he was nearly an oratorian himself. There was an oratory in Pittsburgh, so we have a friend in Archbishop Hebda as oratorians. And so I live at St. Mary's 5 nights a week to maintain that community life. Spend all my days at St. Joe's, obviously. That's my full-time work, and I spend the weekend with Father Luke, although we spend, sometimes going home to St. Mary's on a weeknight means I'm done hanging out with Father Luke at 9 o'clock, and then I drive down the hill, and then I come back at 6:45 for morning confessions and Mass. So it's not always a lot of time, but try to maintain that routine so that the community life doesn't suffer. So the oratory is in need of prayer, and the companions certainly right now too, with the loss of Father Heward. And so I just appreciate your prayers for those things, especially for, and obviously continue to pray for your priests. We're pretty lucky here in St. Paul. We got a lot of really good guys around, and we got some St. Rita's folk here, and Father Joppa is our dean, the dean of our deanery that St. Joe's is in, and didn't know him before, but I'm very encouraged by his example. He's priest's priest, so he takes good care of us and leads us well as our dean. So I just continue to pray for us and pray for all those young men that are in seminary. They're in good hands here at the St. Paul Seminary and the North American College, but I can say as a recent seminarian, it's the prayers of the lay faithful that certainly, they might not always appreciate it or tell you that, but I guarantee you when they get ordained, it'll click for them. They know, I know I didn't make it here without all of you, so much appreciated. And yeah, certainly keep those almost permanent deacons in prayer in these closing weeks before their ordination on December 9th. Big class, 18 this year, so, and I think the class after them's big too, so, and a lot of younger guys in there too, so that's exciting for the diaconate in our archdiocese, which is already very strong. So thanks for listening and having me for lunch. I think am I taking questions?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Father, isn't there currently an oratory already at St. Mary's, the parish where you're at?
So
Is
we're,
it just in formation?
it's in formation, yeah. So the Archbishop can submit, once we have 3 of us living there permanently. So I don't know if I technically count since I also live part-time at St. Joe's, but then he can establish us in a temporary way. And all that means for Rome is that we can live and work as Oratorians. We have all the rights of an oratory, but it's kind of got the escape hatch for a few years in case something goes wrong. But yeah, so we're one of my pet names for the oratory right now is the Exploratory. Or an oratory in formation or aspiring oratory, but yeah, so we're all archdiocesan priests living together. I've just been assigned to St. Mary's only as a living place. And then Father Bryce is half-time at St. Mary's and half-time working on his doctorate through the seminary, but it's actually through Mundelein, but also ours. And then Father Byron Hagen is half-time at Regents Hospital. So, yeah, and then we've got one young man named Kai Olson, who's discerning with us right now. He moved in August for a 1-year discernment period. So that's very exciting for us to have a vocation, a possible vocation right out of our own community already that we've been working on at St. Mary's. So yeah, so there's 4 of us living in the house at St. Mary's now. Yeah.
Will you stay a diocesan priest?
So
Even after?
it's a weird thing. So we don't have a rule, so we're not religious. You know, religious have a rule.
You're unruly?
We're unruly. So, but typically, and it's done differently, it depends on the bishop, but the easiest thing is we actually remain secular priests. We don't have a rule, but we will not typically, we haven't gotten this far with the Archbishop, but we wouldn't typically remain diocesan. And that's only so that the oratory can maintain its ability to be stable in the place where it is, because that's one other mark of the oratory is it never moves. So, and while we usually take it, all of our work is always coming from the local bishop, because we have to have a day job, right? We can't, because we don't have a rule, we're not taking the counsels of poverty, chastity, and obedience. We just have them in the way that a secular priest does. We can't beg. So we go, we take day jobs, you know, we take our work, part of our vocation from the local bishop. So, but part of that, so that we can remain stable and the community life remains whole and healthy, we need to be able to say, no, we're not gonna take the assignment in Annandale, you know, or Delano, because commuting from St. Mary's to Delano would be, and to not live at the oratory would be to not be an oratorian.
I guess I'm getting confused when you're saying secular priest.
Yeah.
Right.
Cause secular.
Yeah,
doesn't
this is,
go
the
with
distinction
priest.
is only religious or secular.
Like the orders.
Right, like, so a religious
Okay.
priest is a religious priest, and if you're not a religious priest, typically a diocesan priest, you're a secular.
Okay.
Yeah, we're like the only thing in the church's history that's a secular priest that's not a diocesan priest.
So you're not diocesan?
Well, I am now, right now. But if the oratory is formed, typically you would have that separation just so that you're not getting sent to Timbuktu, so that you can live at the oratory. Does that make sense?
You'd be getting, this would be through the archbishop, so you're
Yeah,
getting
so
released from your diocese.
Yeah, so the bishop releases us from the diocesan promise of obedience to him, and it's moved to the head of our house. And that's just, like I said, so that future archbishops, who maybe they, have a different idea for where they want us, might want us to go to someplace that would hinder our community life. And, like I said, an Oratorian has to live in the community to be an Oratorian. So, it's a little different than like a religious priest, where you could still be a Dominican even if you're not living in a priory, because the superior has sent you to go run a parish in North Dakota or something, right? So it's not the rule that binds us, it's our community and our life together that binds us. And so to be outside of that would be to not be living the Oratorian life. So I know it sounds a little bit tense, or like it could be tense with the bishop, but that's why the oratories in history are always in the heart of a city, because there's plenty of things to do nearby to help the local bishop. Being a hospital chaplain or a high school, we've got high schools around. That's one thing Oratorians are kind of historically known for, is teaching. John Henry Newman, obviously. So we can take a lot of jobs on that maybe he doesn't want to send somebody who would be a great pastor out in the burbs or farther. He doesn't have to send one of those guys to something that maybe is a less intense assignment or something. We can take that work on and still help out around the city. So oratories are never rural, basically, as a rule. Rome, Vienna, Naples, Paris, London. So
So if you travel, would you stay at an oratory?
we have done, yeah. I mean, we travel together a lot, and because there's not a rule, I mean, we still have our day off, and Oratorians will take a retreat once a year, and so it's not like you get thrown into the outer darkness if you're away from the oratory for a weekend or for a retreat week or something. But it's a bit of a unique situation and kind of a peculiar. There's less than 500 Oratorians in the world today, so. But like I said, there's one in Pittsburgh and Toronto, Cincinnati. So they're around. They've grown in the English-speaking world thanks to John Henry Newman. But
so is your draw to this basically the men that are there?
yeah, so it always starts as friendship, right? So and one thing that's a little different. Yeah. So yes, is the short version. Started with my friendship with those guys.
Sure.
And that example of good community life that I had. I think community life is especially important for priests, especially looking back on recent history and what the church has gone through. It doesn't excuse what was done by priests in the past or give them an excuse anyway, but I think when we're together and we're keeping an eye on each other, we can help before a guy gets into a situation of alcoholism or worse, right, or other things, So always out of love, but that's one of those things where it's good for priests to live together. So it started with that friendship, and then just sort of developed into a desire to do this thing for the local church that it seems like we're being called to do. But it never grows into a very big thing either. Oratories are dictated by the size of the house that they're in. right? Because you can't have two oratories that are one oratory. So our house has 8 rooms. So unless St. Mary's can afford to build a bigger house or add on, the biggest oratory at St. Mary's will be for probably any of our lifetimes will be 8 guys.
And none of you guys will ever be the pastor of St. Mary's?
Right now they are.
Oh, they are?
Yeah. So Father Bryce and Father Byron were the first pair to be co-pastors. So that thing that like Father Jimmy's doing with Bishop Williams here at OLG, Our Lady of Guadalupe. Or who else is a co-pastor? Father Brinkman up in Maternity in Roseville. They're co-pastors. Is it Father Emmanuel? Anyway, so they both have the authority of the pastor, so that if they can make decisions together and they don't have to do the punt it up the chain thing. But so they're in their halftime, each halftime at St. Mary's, they share the one pastor's position. So it'd be typical that we would keep that pastor assignment, but not necessarily that we would always. Not every oratory always has a parish. In Toronto, the oratory has a chapel attached to their house that people come and pray with them, but they run a university. So that's all of their work. They work together to run the small university in Toronto. So that's what they do. So an oratory kind of also has that freedom to create work as well for themselves and to provide a service.
Oh, I just have a comment that I heard about this oratory at Neri, and I heard it referenced, but I just had no clue, and you just brought that so clear.
Oh, good. I'm not usually very clear about
Really
it.
good. And then this is just another question, I think Kathleen said especially pray for the seminarians who are deacons and be making their final, at ordination. And I was thinking about that, and I thought they probably have more temptations. And you don't have to speak from personal experience, but would you say in general you think that's probably true? The closer you're getting to God, getting to your final.
Once I think, from in my experience, once I was very nervous the morning of my ordination to transitional diaconate, because that's like the point of no return.
Right,
I mean,
yeah.
it's easy for the Archbishop to
Well,
undo a transitional deacon if it goes really badly, right? But when you've taken holy orders, you've taken holy orders. And so, but for me, the organ started at the Basilica and we turned left to go down the aisle and it was like, okay, let's go, it was fine. So, the grace of orders is real. The sacramental grace is real. And so, as I'm sure all of you can attest to in your own vocations, but, yeah, for those guys, especially, and those guys in Theology 3 this year who are preparing for ordination to the diaconate, I remember, and we had guys in my class where it was, it was too much. And not that there was anything major going on where they're getting kicked out or something, but just, that's pretty common. And it's good, right? I mean, even if it comes in an uncomfortable way or a not fun way, to let the Lord use that. Doesn't mean you can't ever come back, or maybe you come back right away the next year and you just get ordained. That's what Father John Rumsa, he took a time off, and so when he came back, he was in the same class that he was in before, but he wasn't ordained yet. So he got ordained a deacon with us and then spent a year as a deacon in a parish. So the Lord uses it for what he needs it to be, But yeah, those guys in Theology 3, I think especially, because it's a heavy year, it's really busy at the seminary and the schoolwork is big. So you have that, and you're looking down the barrel of ordination and it comes quick. And so you can kind of pile some stuff up, and it can get, in some cases, it can get really tense for guys. And when everybody else is also in that position, it's hard to have somebody to rely on to kind of be like, just take a breath. You're only 25. You don't have to, it's okay, you can take a few years off. It's, you know, it's fine, you know, so, yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
So if you decide to walk away, would you then just, you would be a diocesan
Yeah,
priest?
yeah, so you're talking about the oratory?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, an oratorian who leaves the oratory immediately becomes a priest of the diocese that the oratory is in, by canon law.
Okay.
Yeah, so,
You could come back, you said.
what's that?
You could come back if you wanted to after a couple.
Oh, yeah, the oratory, I mean, just think about it practically, right? Like, if you've been living with us for 20 years and then you leave us, presumably for some good reason. Maybe you don't like us anymore, or, you know, or the community life isn't that good or whatever. There would probably be some discernment, you know, on, okay, Father Kyle left for 5 years or whatever. Why did he do that? We don't know. So, but now he wants to come back. So, you know, that's just the normal human part of it, right? But there, canonically or whatever speaking, no, there's no reason a guy couldn't go away. Or maybe maybe a guy wants to go, you want to send one of your oratorians for studies in Rome, get another degree or something. You might send him to live with the oratory there, so that the head of the oratory in Rome and the head of our oratory would communicate with each other and say, hey, we're going to send one of our guys. We want him to live with you, please, so that he can maintain the connection to St. Philip and spiritually with us, but he's going to be a part of your community while he's there. Because if you know, so it's real. It's a weird. It feels complicated because it's a weird thing in the church. Just it's peculiar, right?
Right.
But St. Philip was really he's very human. That's really what he was known for. And so back in the 16th century, it was more simple because all the apparatus of canon law and how things worked hadn't been developed to the point that it has been now. So it's more complicated now than it was then, just because of the way the church has grown up since then. But it's really it's just kind of like we live together, we're close, and our closeness helps us do our ministry well. And so to maintain that closeness, these are the things that need to be set up by the local bishop to ensure that, right? So I think Archbishop is really looking to us, especially in St. Paul, to help especially St. Mary's, which was such a small parish, and with St. Louis nearby and Assumption too, not a competition, but to help them. You know, there's been a lot of collaboration between those three churches for a long time, so kind of to help put a shot in the arm, as it were. And regions, and actually we have a little bit of a relationship with Unity High School over in Burnsville. So Father Evans and I help with confessions. We've got some lay oratorians that teach there, so that's how we got connected with them, but do a little chaplain work. And
When are your confessions?
In general?
St. Mary's?
St. Mary's, they have every day, Monday through Saturday, I guess. 11:30 before the noon mass, and then on Saturday from 3:30 to 4:30. But I'm not usually there for that. I'm at St. Joe's. St. Joe's has even more time than that.
All right.
All right, I'll stop now.
Yeah.